It is the sense of responsibility that gives meaning to our life, that gives us the purpose, right? Even though we might have tasks just lying around, but we don't take responsibilities of those tasks. And so they're just meaningless. And so we miss out the possible key to finding the meaning of life, and we miss out the satisfaction we get on completing those tasks. In the context I'm about to speak today, there are two ways of achieving happiness. One is that we take responsibility, and two, that we don't take responsibility. When we don't take responsibility, nothing matters, right? And when nothing matters, we miss out on all of those, when nothing matters, and eventually we are happy no matter what, right? And when we feel happy no matter what, eventually life brings disasters. And we don't know what to do about those disasters because we never took responsibility in the first place. So there's a better way of being happy, right? It's not a bad way of being happy to just avoid everything, but there's a better way of being happy. Is that to take on responsibility of life. And when we do that, we understand that we have to take control over ourselves first, so that we can have authority over all the things that should affect us and that have affected us. For me, it was particularly difficult to take responsibility and deal with those tasks because my situation was particularly difficult. To begin with, I used to be a very confused person. I didn't understand how the real world really worked because I never took I was never exposed to the real world. And because of that, I lived under the shade of my parents always. About a year ago, I came from Riyadh to Karachi all by myself. And I had to deal with everything. So I had a constant exposure to the real world, right? And I felt in a very stressful situation that took over my head. And so that turned into distress. That setback, that major setback, affected my studies. That was the main task I really wanted to achieve well in, right? I wanted to score well in my studies. I wanted to do something. And that feeling of loss, helplessness made it very difficult for me to achieve that task, right? But when we set our perspective and when we think about an aim, a goal, what happens is that the universe starts to reveal itself as if it were revealing its secrets to you. In reality, what happens is that your brain rewires itself according to that aim, that task that you want to achieve, right? And so your perspective builds up accordingly. Is that is the aim, and your brain rewires itself to arm itself in order to achieve that task. And when I took responsibility of myself, I said I wanted to do well. So that perspective was slowly building up. And it was painful, but was helpful, right? Slow building of perspective helped me in the real world that I was just exposed to, and I didn't know how to deal with it, right? Slowly I began to gain confidence because the perspective that I was missing slowly came to me. And it was a long, slow process. By that time, I reached my exams. There was about a month in my finals, and now I started to gain authority over my head. I started to understand what I have to do and why I have to do that, right? So that as that perspective builds stronger, I realized something. That when we aim for a task, we have to have the attitude, the right attitude for it. And the importance of attitude is something we have to understand, right? It's that a small change in attitude leads to a big difference. And so I'd like to show this diagram, a beautiful sketch, is that, let's say this is success. This is success, right? And this is failure, right? First time I hit the red cross, and you can see the path that it takes. It's wide of my target. My target is that small flag, right? It's far away and it's quite wide. And so to think that I'm far away from my target is wrong, because it wasn't that distance that matters. It's this small distance that matters, right? So we have to focus on this distance, right? A small change in, had I hit the ball at an angle slightly different, or at a slightly to the right in this case, I would have achieved my target, right? So the small change in distance leads to a bigger change in outcome. And so that's what we have to understand. It's a metaphor that a small change in attitude leads to a big change in outcome, right? And that's the importance of your attitude. So as my perspective gained strength and I became stronger in understanding my task, I realized this, that I was afraid of failing, right? And when you're afraid of failing, when you're afraid that you might fail, alright, you take up a defensive position. When you have to go all out and retry again and again and again, but you're afraid that you might fail. And so you don't get the chance to do it over and over again, right? So I realized this about myself as I strongly understood who I was. And so I tried to change that, right? So instead I took it as like this, right? What if I failed, right? What if I didn't reach what I actually wanted? So I would be helpless. I would go again all of that process that I went through, the process of failure. And I named it hell, right? So this is hell, right? And when I look at my aim, I see all sorts of struggles and painful situations that I have to deal with. And I say, wait, that's bad, right? I shouldn't go there. But where do I have to go then? It's in hell, because that's what it is for me, right? And so whenever I look back, I'm already motivated to move forward, yes? So that's the attitude we have to have. And as time passed and I understood who I really was, I gained control over myself and I was doing well. I was studying up to 10 hours a day, quite efficiently. I was reaching my potential. But there was something that bothered me. It was that after I was returning home from my last exam, I told to a very good friend that I feel weird, a sense of emptiness. I felt as if something I haven't felt before. Is that when depression and happiness or sadness builds, it takes time, right? It builds over time. But this was sudden, right? So it felt so weird, so alien, that feeling. And I tried to find what it really was. And back to where we began, that it's the sense of purpose that gives meaning to life, right? And now that my exams were over, my task was fulfilled. And even though I was quite happy about it, but I felt that emptiness, that sadness, it grabbed me, right? It suddenly grabbed me, that realization that, what do I do now? And I realized that it increased my thirst for fulfillment. I wanted more. I wanted to achieve bigger things, right? So I understood that I have to increase make my goals higher. I have to aim for bigger things so that I can have that sense of fulfillment again and again and again. Because it's a process of failure. It's a process that takes you on a journey. And when you finally reach it, you find another purpose and you solve that equation again and again. And that's the meaning of life, right? It's to find purpose, take on a task, because our brain reacts to it significantly. It develops a perspective so that we can deal with the task, right? Now it's important for us to understand responsibility because we are living a comfortable life, and if we are living a modern life where we have good medication, we have technology, we have easy communication, right? But we are heading towards a dangerous path. That is, we have major catastrophes ahead of us: poverty, climate change, and unequal distribution of wealth. They say 50 people own as much wealth as about 4 billion people. The poorest 50%, 4 billion people. So the equation is 50 is to 4 billion, right? And what are we going to do about it? One person can't change that. So we have to understand that we have to take responsibility of ourselves so that we can grow stronger and build a perspective and develop the insight to deal with such bigger problems, because they require collective responsibility. And so it's important for us that we take on that collective responsibility, and we have to gain control over ourselves so that we can understand moral goals and develop on it. And it's considering our time, I think that this is an idea worth sharing. Thank you.